Today we will be discussing on report designer tips and tricks on how to create your report more efficiently. Before I jump on to the topic, let me just specify my system specifications. I am on Ubuntu 12 and I am using report designer version 3.9 for today's presentation. Today I will be covering two major topics. One is how to add alternate background colors to the rows on a report, and the other one is embedding ETL within the TRPT or within the report so that we don't have to migrate both the ETL and the report separately. Let's first start on the first one, adding alternative background colors to the reports on the report, to the rows on the report. It's very useful. For example, if you look at this report where I don't have any background colors for the alternative rows, it's not that clear. But say for example, if you look at this report where I have just highlighted every alternate row, it's more clear and more user-friendly. So let's see how we can achieve adding these alternate background colors to the rows. Adding alternate background colors can be done using two ways. It can be done in two ways. First one is active fill, activating the fill option, and then the other one is row banding. So I would first, as I mentioned, that we would first start with activating the fill option. So for that, let me just create an example using that. To create the background color for a row, we can use the element rectangle. So this is the element rectangle. So what you need to do is you just need to drag that in. You can drag it in wherever you would like to use this feature. So I would like to do that on my details where I have the row. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dragging this rectangle, increasing the size of rectangle as much as I need to accommodate all my columns. And what I do is I just drag and drop those columns into this rectangle. Say for example, I would just drag and drop the column on this. I would try to accommodate the columns such that it fits well onto the rectangle. I have already done the examples. I just want to get rid of the thing that I just added. So what we did, the first step is to bring in a rectangle, and then we increase the size of the rectangle and accommodate the column so that it fits well into that rectangle. Then the second thing that I would define is I would try to activate the fill on this rectangle. So in my structure option, I can now see this rectangle. So if I highlight on the rectangle on my design also, on my report also gets highlighted. So what I would be doing under this style, I have different options where I can do different things, like I can do padding, I can do text, I can align the text to be left or in the middle. Or with all those options, I do have an option to fill. So what I would like to fill a color, so I would say true. And I would specify what type of color I would like to fill. So I have different. So when you just click on this little icon, it allows you to select different color ranges. So you could select any one of them, whichever you would like to use, then just click on OK. So I've already selected. So two things that we did where we just highlighted the fill, we made it true. Before it was undefined or false or undefined. So I've just made it true, and then I've just filled the color. So that's the first thing that we do. And then the second thing that we do is the way we would like to fill the color is we want the alternate rows to be highlighted. So we would like to specify that when we would like to see this color. So that's done in this part where it's called size. Let me just increase the width, size and position, where you see height, width, height of the column, width, etc. This is nothing but the height of your rectangle, width of your rectangle axis if you want to increase them. So I have an option called visible here. So I can add a condition as to when I want my row to be visible with this color. So I've filled a color and I'm explicitly specifying the condition when I would like to see this color on my row. So what I say is, first and foremost, I would just specify the visible. It should be visible, true, yes, it has to be. And then I would like to specify the condition. As I mentioned that here, I would just like to highlight alternate rows. So the condition is that I would like to highlight every even row. So before I describe this function, let me tell you what's this count and where am I getting that from. So as soon as we define the rectangle, the other thing that we need is to highlight the alternate rows. So for that, I need to know what are my alternate rows. So it's nothing but every second row. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a simple function called count, which is nothing but count running. Let me show you how I add this function. So click on function, add function. It gives you different options of selecting different functions, making it a bit wider. And then what I am now concentrating is on just finding running count. So if I double click on this, there are different options for me to have the running sum, running count, group count, count distinct, so on. But I just want the count running, so I just click on it, double click and say okay. So this is how it adds. But I didn't specify any name. I can explicitly go here and specify the name of the function. I already have it, so I'm deleting it. This is just for me. I've defined a function to know the count. So what I'm doing now is, in my visible, I want to use this function such that every alternate row gets highlighted. So what I'm doing is I'm using the simple I7 function. As we are all aware, this just gives, this checks whether it's an even or no. If it's even, it returns true. So every even row, I want it to be highlighted with that color. So what I say is I7 count is what my function is. The way how I define the function is there's different options for you available here. You can select either of any of these functions, and you can just use any other operators if you want, like addition, subtraction, all those here. I'm just using a simple I7 count function. So I'm just using I7, and this is the function that I've already defined. So I'm just using that function. So now if I preview on my report, if you look at this report, every alternate row is highlighted. What we can do is we can change this function into different functions. If you want to highlight every third row or every fourth row, we can use different options to do that. So this was our first example. So it's using the fill option. So let me just highlight the basic points that we do here. First thing is we pull in a rectangle to which we fill a color, and then we specify it to be visible. When we say it has to be visible, we would like to specify the condition when you want it to be visible. If you don't specify any condition, let's see, let me just get rid of this function. And if I close and if I preview, it's just filling color to everything, because all the columns are within that rectangle and I haven't specified any condition when I want it to fill the color. That's right. So if I specify a function here, then it would just fill the color to the alternative rows. Okay, so this was one way of adding alternative background colors to the rows. Let's see the other way of doing it. The other simple and more simple way of doing this is there's an option for you in your format, row banding. If you try to select a color here, whatever color you want it to be, say for example yellow or anything that you want your alternative background to be highlighted with, and just click OK and just preview on it. So it automatically populates the alternative background colors. This is very simple option to do that. So these are two different options, one by using fill option, another by using row banding. Now let's move on to the other topic for today, that's embedding ETL within the PRPT. First I would consider first I would take you through the simple ETLs that I've created today. I have two examples. The first one is test ETL as a data source, where what I'm doing here is I'm just using a simple generate row step. I'm specifying a field called test field, and I'm passing this value, and I'm generating 5 rows with this value. And what I'm doing is I'm just copying that. This is a do nothing, a dummy step. What I'm doing is I just want to copy these rows onto this step, and I would like to see these generated 5 rows on my report. So that's my business scenario. So I'm using this ETL to generate these 5 rows, and I'm just passing them on to a dummy step, do nothing. So all my output or the target data is into this step, is on this step now. So what I would do in my report designer is, now what I would like to use is, I would like to use this ETL that I've created called test ETL as data source, as my data source for the report. I don't want to write it onto a database and then connect using JDBC connection, connect to the database and then use a query to fetch data from the table, or any other option like getting it from an Excel or anything. I would just like to use it from the data integration option. So what I'm doing is, sorry, just trying to open that example. So the first thing that how we use an ETL as this source or as a data source is, first we need to go into file, resource, and specify the data source. I have already defined it. If you would like to call this as test data source or data as an ETL, let's just create one. So I just say import and I just select an option. As to where my ETL is, I would like to select the ETL from, I have it in my revenue folder, so I would just go in there and select the ETL. So I just have this ETL here. So I'm just selecting this, and what I do is I need to specify my content type as text XML. And before I save this file, I need to save that as .xml file. Because I used this as .ktr, I need to go into the folder where I have this and save it back into .xml file, and then I can use that. I've already done that, so in my I don't have to do it again, so I'm just closing that. So that's the first option. We need to go explicitly to file, resource, and specify our data source here. And the name that we specify here is very important because that's what we would use in our data option. So the second thing that we do is, so I would go into my data set and I would right click and use Pentaho data integration option, and I would click on add query, and then I would use the same name what I specified here, not going in and selecting again. So I would use the name that I've specified under my resources. Say for example, in this, if I edit this query, I've used test data source. That's my ETL that I've created, test data source, and it has 2 steps. So if you look at the options that it gives in the report designer, and the steps are the 2 steps that are available in my ETL. So if you have 20 steps, it would explicitly define all the steps here. You could use any of this step. In this case, I'm copying all my target rows onto dummy step. That's why I would like to use this. So I would highlight this. I can click on preview to see the data. So this is what the row generator does. It just generates 5 records with this value. So that's achieved. So I get this stuff up. I can use this on my report. So I've already defined this, so I would be using this on my report. So now what I can do is I can just drag that in and then use it in wherever I require. So if I preview on it, I can see that. The main advantage of using or embedding ETL within the report or the PRPT is that we don't have to migrate both the ETL and the report separately. It's just a package. When you add this as a report, this ETL is already saved as part of this package. So it's all been in a single bundle. So you need not migrate both of them separately. So that helps us. That makes things much simpler. The other thing, as you look here, the other thing that I would like to show is under your details, you have detail header and detail footer. Whenever we create a new report, file new report, we don't see those two options available. Now let's see how we can get those options. So if you click on your detail body, then if you go on to the attribute, under detail header, if you go on to the details header, and then if you click on the attribute, you can see that hide on canvas. That's true. So it's hidden. So what you need to do is you just need to set that to false, so that will automatically show you. Same thing happens with the footer. Just highlight that, so that will enable the option. So this is what the other thing that I wanted to show you guys. And then now let's see another example on the same embedding ETL. And in this case, I've used, in the previous case, we just had one target row. So I wanted to show more than one target row. So what I've done here is I've just used a simple table input step, and I've stretched all the columns from the customer. And what I'm doing is I'm just copying it onto a select value step. In my report designer, what I would be doing is I've created the simple layout where I have I've defined the page header, report header, and I've specified the detail column names in my detail header, and then I've pulled in the columns here. Similar to previous one, what we did, I've gone into file, resources, and I've added this. So I've called this as test customer ETL as data source. And then the next thing that what I have done is I've gone into the data, right click on the data set, and I select the option of Pentaho data integration. So when I click on that, I just specify a name. First click on this little green button, which allows you to add a query. So when you click on the query, that's when this part gets highlighted. So you specify a name for the query, and then you can define, you have to use the same name what you have defined in your resources. So in this case, I've defined it as test customer ETL as data source. So I'm using the same name here. I'm using the same name here. And then what I'm doing is I'm just using, this allows me to select all the steps that were within that ETL. So if you look at ETL, all that I had were just 2 steps. One was the table input, the other was select values. So that's what I see here. Now I would like to use the columns that are in select value step. So I will just highlight that and click OK. So now this gives me all the list of columns that are available in that select value step. So now I can just drag and drop them into my report and use these columns. I need not again create any or dump it into a target table and then reuse them. So what I've done is I've just pulled those in, and if I preview on this will give me the option of the data is displayed here. So this was the other example with the same concept of embedding ETL within the report designer. The other few things that I wanted to highlight were how do we fill. So for example, if you look at this layout, what I've done is I've filled color to the complete header. I've filled it for the whole report header. I've not specifically filled it to each of the label that I've added. What I've done is I've filled it to the whole one. So how do I do that? If you click on the page header, it gives you a different options to fill or different options. You can change the font size. Say for example, if I increase the font size to 12, what happens is it increases the font size for all the text that's under this to 12. So instead of, rather than going individually into each level and increasing or modifying the changes, I can go ahead and do it under the style. So I could use different lines like center, right, left, or I could fill a background color individually going, or I could just say go to details tab here. Under details body you have detail header details. Just go into details and just click on whatever the background color you would like to highlight. Say for example, if I would like to use this color, just click on it and just preview. So it automatically highlights it for everything, not just exclusively to that particular data set. So for example, if I don't do this, say if I don't do it on the details, say if I go into details and if I get rid of this, and then if I do it specifically on a particular column, or I can go here. So it's the same thing. I've highlighted this column, I've gone into style, and I'm changing the color here. So if I do this, what happens is it just populates the color to that particular highlighted column. So we could either do this way, or we could either do it for all. Right, that's all for today. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks, Haley.
Thanks, Rini. Now, if you have any questions, please go ahead and use the chat feature. Thanks very much. Hope you can join us next week.